Hello, it's Ruby, and today I'm going to be giving you my top tips on actually sitting down and studying or working when you're not really in the mood to do it. You can't be in the mood for something all of the time. The first thing is motivating yourself, and this is the crux of it, right? It's what we all want. We all want to be motivated. We all seek to be motivated because there is nothing more satisfying and enlivening and vibrant than being motivated. But unfortunately, the reality is that we won't always be motivated, and sometimes we will have to study, we will have to work, even when we're not really in the mindset to do it. We'll come to possible solutions for that. But I wanted to start by giving just 6 really quick things that you can do to boost your motivation in the short term. I personally find that when I'm not feeling motivated, the best thing I can do is go outside, get some fresh air, and possibly do some exercise, just get my body moving. I always feel so much better for it. This will usually change my mindset if I'm feeling a bit sluggish. And there have been so many studies which have evidenced the importance of fresh air and being in nature for your mental health. Number 2 is to have a shower. Really random one, but I always feel so much more refreshed when I've had a shower or even just washed my face. Number 3, tidy your space and make it somewhere that you want to sit down and work. So I'll light a candle, I'll disinfect my desk, I'll make sure it's not cluttered. In combination with that, tidy your room. I really do think that a tidy space is a tidy mind, and I always concentrate a lot better when my room is tidy. So just make sure your space is somewhere that you like to be, because then you're more likely, I think, to want to sit down and study. Number 4, watch study with me videos or something similar. I do this all the time. I've shared study with me's over the years, and that's because I personally really love watching them and I find them motivating. And so if you're looking for a quick boost of motivation, sometimes just watching a 5-minute study vlog can put you in the right mindset. But kind of in combination with that, being aware of what things trigger that feeling of motivation for you. You could create a list of these things with embedded podcasts and songs and videos, passages that you can quickly look at when you want to feel motivated. Next, you can meditate or journal, just something reflective. And finally, try saying affirmations to yourself. Number 2, build things into your routine. So I think the trick is to relieving resistance, which means that you won't need the motivation to study all of the time. Building study habits into your routine can be really helpful because it eliminates that aspect of choice. I'm just going to make a mug of tea. So for example, every morning whilst working my dissertation, I'd work on it first thing so that there wasn't any resistance. It was just part of my routine, it became habitual. And I did a very similar thing during my A-levels actually. The thing that I always had the most resistance to was writing English essays, funnily enough, because I put so much pressure on myself to do them to a certain standard. So every morning I'd spend just 10 minutes doing a timed English paragraph, and that basically just reduced my resistance around those tasks and meant that they weren't quite so daunting. And then that just leads on to things like timetables too. It works in the same way where you don't have choice. So that sounds awful. You know that you need to do this thing and it's on your timetable, and so you don't think about not doing it, you just kind of get on with it. And that doesn't mean to say that you're not going to enjoy doing it. Timetable is really useful for getting myself to sit down and do something and just make the most out of my time. And I've spoken about timetables so much on my channel, so I'll link a video somewhere on the screen if you want to have a look. And I have got my nice mug of tea here. Number 3, you can do an easier task, something that you enjoy which can ease your way into the study session. So I might make a list of things which I could do if I had the time to. So my favourite bit of studying is research and learning new things, and so on my list I would have things like read this chapter from this book, or research this particular thing, or read more about this theorist. These are tasks which aren't maybe necessary for revising for an exam or preparing for an exam or an essay, but they equally will be useful if I do them. So you could look over your list of these things and then do one of these more fun activities just to ease your way into the session. And again, this just eliminates some of the resistance to studying. And the kind of task that this will be will differ so much between different people depending on what things you enjoy. So if you really love making flashcards, for example, then that will be on this list of enjoyable study activities. As I say, my favourite kind of studying to do is research-based, and when I am researching, one of the tools that I like to use is Perlego, which I've spoken about loads on my channel. You're probably tired of hearing about it, but I love Perlego and I'm really excited to say they're sponsoring this video. Perlego is an online library with over 500,000 textbooks. All of it's digital. This is really great if you can't access your in-person university library, or if you don't want to spend lots of money on physical textbooks. Perlego is optimized for academic reading, so you can make highlights in multiple different colors. You can also make notes. So I tend to use the note function to make a note of synoptic links to the things that I'm learning. So for example, I'm reading this book on early modern theatre, which talks about how legends and myths were retold and remembered through theatre. So in order to make this synoptic, I might think about how that links to some of the plays that I have studied. For example, Comus by Milton, which is my favourite one on the early modern module I did this year. And Comus, as you can probably tell from the title, is very much built around mythology. Comus was the son of Bacchus and Circe. Milton very much plays with Welsh mythology. In Welsh mythology, Gwendolen orders for Sabri to be drowned in the river. The river is then named after her, so that's the river Lady Sabrina, or the River Severn today. The ending to Comus very much plays with that myth of Sabrina. So as a note, I would just remind myself of these mythological references in Comus. I would also try and challenge whatever the critic is saying. I feel that this just makes me more active when I'm reading, as opposed to passively consuming the material. I'm thinking about how it links to my own studies. And also, one really cool thing that you can do now on Perlego is sort your books into lists and bookshelves, so you can group all of your readings in one place and have everything really easily accessible and make a note of things that you want to go back to. So if you want to start using Perlego, you can use my code Granger for 50% off and also a free trial, and that will be linked down below. Now we'll go on to number 4, which is so easy, but one of the top tips that I can offer, which is setting a 5-minute timer and sitting down to work. Maybe you don't have the time to sit there and do a more fun activity. Maybe you've got a deadline tomorrow. Set a timer for 5 minutes and get yourself to sit down for just 5 minutes and work. You can get up after 5 minutes if you don't feel like studying anymore, but in practice, by sitting down and doing just 5 minutes of work, you tend to realise that it's actually not as hard as you thought it was, and so you can keep on going. So yeah, 5-minute timers work wonders. Finally, number 5, which does link in from number 4, it does again require a timer optionally, and this is especially relevant to essays or any kind of task which you might find yourself being quite perfectionistic over. So not necessarily revision, but anything where you're creating something and putting pressure on yourself to create it to a certain standard. This can often lead us to procrastinate and develop resistance towards the material because we're so worried that we're going to get it wrong, and we're holding ourselves to such a high standard that we don't want to sit down and do it because we're like, gosh, this is going to be so hard because I've got to create this incredible caliber of material. So what I find really helpful is sitting down and telling myself that my first draft or my first attempt can be terrible. In fact, it should be terrible. So I will set a timer for 30 minutes, write as much as I can, not put any pressure on myself for it to be good, and it just gets me to sit down and do it. So if you're struggling to sit down and work, I really recommend doing this. And then you can go back and edit it afterwards, but in all likelihood, it probably won't be as bad as you thought it would be, and yeah, it's just really worth doing. I just wanted to sit down with some tea for the last part of this video. This is Yellow Buds from Fortnum & Mason. It's just so delicately sweet and nutty. It's one that I very rarely have because it is quite pricey, but whenever I do have it, it's really special. So that last piece of advice, sitting down and allowing yourself to be imperfect, I think it's one of the most important things we can do as students, because there's so much pressure on us to do things perfectly and there's an expectation that we should do things perfectly. I think just the way that mark schemes in themselves work, we're always trying to perfect it. There's always a slightly better way to word something. So I suppose what I'm saying is it's a really useful exercise in its own right. Like, not only does it curb procrastination, it's a good way to combat perfectionism when it comes to academics. It's funny because I think a lot of the pressure with an essay, for example, you're writing it and you're like, okay, this needs to be perfect. It means that you end up editing each sentence by sentence, which means that the overall draft takes a really long time. It used to take me ages to write essays for university because every single sentence I was like, okay, this needs to be better, this needs to be perfect. But, and I found this so much more, I found this really liberating. My first draft of an essay, I never put pressure on myself for it to be really perfect. It never has to be perfect. It's just about getting it down, and then you can go back and you can edit it. Because I don't procrastinate editing as much as I procrastinate writing an essay. Editing isn't as hard, like in how I perceive it as writing. Just a little thought over tea. So now this is something you might have gathered that I'm trying to do at the end of all of my videos. I'm just going to write a letter now to a viewer. Today I'm using this diamine ink in Writer's Blood. I'm going to say thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that you found it helpful. Good luck if you've got exams, good luck if you've got deadlines, and please try not to put too much pressure on yourself, which again is always easier said than done, but I think sometimes just somebody saying it can do some good. Thank you again to Perlego for sponsoring today's video. As I say, you can use my code GRANGE if you want to get a free trial and then 50% off. But I'm gonna sit here and write this letter, and I just hope that you have a productive week.